Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Thursday and we are going to be looking at the Divisional Round, previewing all four of the weekend's games. We'll also be talking about some head coaching news. But you know what? We're going to kick it off with an update on our playoff bracket. And, you know, well, during the regular season for our league, my team just managed to put up a lot of points despite all obstacles and kind of cruise to the first. Dennis had some struggles. You know what? In the playoffs, we've reversed it. I am definitely bringing up last place. I managed just 175.975 points for the weekend. For a team that scored 48 points in the Packers, I managed to find the only fantasy relevant player on their team that posted a 0, which was Jaden Reed. Dennis, on the other hand, is in first place right now, 246.255 points. How does it feel, Dennis? You had 4 players with 32 or more points.
How many of them were one and done? That's what I want to know.
Puka and Dak are one and done, but Josh Allen's still going, and Aaron Jones still going.
Yeah, I picked Jones thinking he would be one and done. I kind of aimed my one and dones in the round 1 for running backs, and clearly I missed. No, I feel good. How far am I ahead of second place, though? That's the real question.
So second place is Michael Lewis. He's at 235.125 points. And third place is our friend John Hamlers at 219.9 points. So you have an 11 point lead for over second place, and you're about 27 points over third place. So
I got
not
Lamar
bad.
And Purdy joining the fray this week.
You're about 75 points in front of me. So I'm gonna need some miracles to come through. I might have to see if we can get the Tanya Harding treatment on Aaron Jones so that Jaden Reed can catch some passes on Sunday. Or Saturday.
Romeo Dobbs is who you need him to get.
I almost went with Dobbs, but it seemed like Jaden Reed had been a better bet, and it just
yeah, it was. This was Dobbs' best game of the season. So,
let's move on to a couple of news and notes before we dive into the games. We mentioned Bill Belichick interviewed with the Falcons when we had our show on Tuesday. Jim Harbaugh also interviewing with the Falcons. Still seems like Chargers might be a better fit for him, but what would you think of Harbaugh and the Falcons?
Well, it feels like Belichick is basically in the midst of negotiating a deal with the Falcons, and I think Harbaugh is going to be.
To me.
Huh?
Still doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I'd say another old money billionaire owner, but I mean, aren't they all in the NFL? No, I think Harbaugh is going to be fine. He's in the process of he's negotiating with Michigan, so I'm not sure who he's using for leverage against whom. Like, does he want to stay at Michigan and he's just using the NFL for leverage? Does he want to go to the NFL and he's just using Michigan for leverage? I mean, granted, part of what he's trying to negotiate with Michigan is, hey, when we get busted for all of this stuff I'm being investigated for, in my contract it says you can't fire me for that. That's literally what he's trying to negotiate. While he's also saying, but we didn't cheat. But when I get caught, you can't fire me for it. Dirty bastard.
Well,
anyways,
seems a
no,
little.
I think with the weapons they have in Atlanta, whoever goes there, whether it's Harbaugh or Belichick, they got to solve the quarterback problem.
Yeah.
Pitts, London, Bijan, Algier, Jonnu Smith. I think Belichick going there, he can make the defense work.
Their defense actually was improved. They got some players last off season. We'll see. I thought Atlanta was going to be better than they were this year. So,
gotta have a quarterback, man. Gotta have a quarterback.
I don't know if I had breathed a fantasy sigh of relief at Arthur Smith going, because I thought it was going to mean wheels up for London and Pitts, and I'm not sure Belichick would be the one that would make me be like, we're right in there. I mean, it's just going to depend on who he has to run.
If he brings in Josh McDaniels, it's going to be like,
well, what if he brings in Patricia? That was who he wanted to have as offensive coordinator last year. I don't know. Well, we know one place none of those guys is going is Dallas. Mike McCarthy, Jerry Jones was very emphatic, is returning as head coach. He may not have his defensive coordinator, though. Dan Quinn has already interviewed with a couple of teams, has 3 more on the docket. He is basically interviewing with everyone. We've seen him kick the tires and be a leading candidate the last couple of years and stay in Dallas. Do you think this might be finally the year he decides to move on?
I don't, he's a pretty good defensive coach. Maybe not exceptional. Could he use some infusion of new blood on his staff to maybe bring some new ideas? There's always that chance of your scheme gets caught up with, and you have to adjust. Whether or not Quinn is adjusting very well, some games it looks like he is, and other games it looks like he isn't. I don't think he's done anything to merit getting a head coaching position. We've seen him as a head coach, and there's no there. In my eyes, I think if he can stay with McCarthy for, and I get keeping McCarthy because it's like, what are your options? He's gone 12-5. It isn't like the team is playing good in the post or regular season. Do you want him to go further? Yeah, you do. But I mean, it's the playoffs and everybody brings their best game. And sometimes you just get got. And that's kind of happened with McCarthy. Do I think McCarthy is a Super Bowl winning coach? No, I think Brett Favre won that Super Bowl, not Mike McCarthy. And as we've seen with the recent Matt LaFleur stuff, and the coaches up there, it's like, hey man, it's nice to actually see our offense run the way we designed it and not have the quarterback changing the play, and us as standing on the sideline going, hey, God, I wonder what was called.
Yeah.
So no, I think McCarthy, it unless he's going to bring in somebody like Belichick or like Pete Carroll, who I think both were maybe dubious choices at best. I think we're seeing the sand run out of the hourglass for both of those guys.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to move on from McCarthy for the sake of moving on.
Yeah.
I get it as a Dallas fan. You're probably frustrated. Trust me, I've been there. I'm a Lions and Browns fan.
Well, another interesting piece of news, the Bears kicking the tires with Cliff Kingsbury to potentially be their offensive coordinator. What makes that more interesting is he had worked with Caleb Williams at USC. And wouldn't you know, the Bears hold the number 1 pick. And we've heard reports that Caleb Williams is not hot on the Bears as currently constructed. What do you make of this? If they hire Kingsbury, do you think that means we're probably seeing Fields go elsewhere?
Yeah, it would seem as such. I know they brought in Greg Roman as well. For the Bears, to me, it makes the most sense. Well, I don't know how much sense it makes because really it's Matt Eberflus scrambling to keep his job is really what it is. He jettisoned most of his offensive staff. He's going to do whatever the front office tells him. If they say, hey, Fields is your guy, he's going to probably hire Roman. If they say, you know what, we're taking this package and we're going to get Caleb Williams, he's going to bring in Kingsbury. But who knows if either one of those is really going to work or be enough to save Eberflus's job. It might be, part of, I'm developing this philosophy, and I've kind of mentioned it before. If you're a head coach or you're an owner of a team and you want continuity, you hire an offensive coach that has a good system, because even if coordinators come up and move on, you're still running that head coach's scheme. If you're a defensive head coach and you hire a hotshot offensive coordinator, I mean, they're already talking about Bobby Slowick being considered for head coaching positions. And he went from, PFF to 1 year as a quarterback coach to 1 year as an OC. And it's like, man, what's going on? D'Amico Ryans may be out in the cold looking for an OC here next week. So as a defensive guy, it's hard to keep that continuity on the offensive side of the ball. So for me, I'm starting to lean more towards teams that hire offensive head coaches for the continuity aspect of the offense. I don't know. It doesn't bode well in my eyes, I guess, for Eberflus.
Well, I mean, we are talking about Kingsbury, the guy that got hired in Arizona and threw aside the number 10 overall draft pick to take somebody else at number 1 just a year later. I mean,
right.
I've seen enough of Josh Rosen that maybe he wasn't the guy, but I don't know at that point in time that you had seen enough or he'd gotten a fair shot enough with the team for them to just say, well, he's worthless and move on.
I mean, would it surprise anybody for Kingsbury, for them to trade away Fields, draft Williams, Kingsbury go in, the team goes, 7-9, 7-10. Still,
what they went this year too.
And they say, you know what? We're going to can Eberflus. We're going to promote Kingsbury.
I guess it depends on how they do offensively, and whether that's not all 7 and 10s are created equal. But, we'll see. Eberflus, I think, was kind of lucky that he managed to pretty easily retain his position. I thought that, early in the season, it seemed like they were cruising towards starting over, but we will see. I don't know if they, there's a lot of pressure on Ryan Poles too, as the general manager, because you have a lot of assets. You've been supposedly working on trading pieces and a way to build these assets. This is a big off season for both of them, I would think.
It is.
We'll move on to the divisional round of the playoffs. 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. First game on Saturday, the 10-7 Houston Texans at the 13-4 number 1 seeded Baltimore Ravens. These two teams actually did play in the regular season. It was a 25-9 Baltimore Ravens victory, but that was actually week 1 of the NFL season. And I'm going to say, Dennis, that's hard to take a lot away from the week 1 matchup and apply it to where these two teams are now. So CJ Stroud, that was his first NFL start. Now we've seen him do some phenomenal things. Do you expect it to be a little different against the defense this time around?
Yeah, I expect it to be different. I've talked about, I'm a huge CJ Stroud fan, and he's had a great season. But I talked a little bit during the season about how some of the underlying metrics were very middling. And one of those is turnover-worthy throws, where he's the 5th highest, or not turnover-worthy, off-target throws. He's the 5th highest off-target throw of quarterbacks with 350 dropbacks. So while And this is what I tell my son who plays sports all the time. I'm like, if you're a receiver, your job is to make the quarterback look good. And well, these Houston wide receivers have been making Stroud look good. Now, don't get me wrong, Stroud has played really good. He's making the right decisions. He's getting the ball out, getting it to the right people. And part of that is that the offensive line has given him the 6th highest time to throw. So they've been playing once they literally started the season with 4 of their starting linemen not playing. And as the season went on, they slowly got them back. And we saw it against Cleveland last week where Laramie Tunsil went up against Myles Garrett and pretty well neutralized him. So the offensive line has started to come together. They've got, they didn't get Juice Scruggs back because he injured himself and is out for the season. But Titus Howard on the right side, they got back. I just mentioned his name on the left side. I forgot his name. Anyways, Laramie Tunsil. So, man, getting old is rough. So the offensive line has been playing well. Baltimore gives up the 8th fewest passing yards and the 2nd fewest passing touchdowns to quarterbacks. So now, while Stroud can run, he typically doesn't. He does have the highest ADOT in the league for quarterbacks with 350 dropbacks at 9.3 yards. So Stroud is going to go in and he's going to play his game. They're going to use the zone run game with Devin Singletary. And oddly enough, we see teams like the Ravens who have a really strong attack with tight ends. We've seen it in Pittsburgh when, they had Ertz and Goddard, so they were really strong attack. These teams also tend to give up stuff to the tight ends. It's really kind of weird. So Schultz and we saw Brevin Jordan break off a big one last week. So there's going to be some opportunity there. Do I think Stroud is going to be able to pull it off? I'm pulling for him. I really am. But I don't know if I can get there yet. If they had a better running game, I just can't bring myself to wholeheartedly believe in Devin Singletary. I just can't get there.
And he has the most playoff experience of anybody on the team.
He does, but that doesn't make him a better running back. It just makes him fortunate to have played for the Bills. So I like where Stroud is at, and I think he's going to be able to do what he does. I don't know if they're going to be able to turn him over because he is careful with the ball. It's going to be good. I expect him to have – it's one of those, I think in the first game he had 240 yards, but he didn't throw any touchdowns, didn't have any interceptions. It feels like we're going to maybe get a redo of that, maybe with a touchdown. I mean, Nico Collins.
They didn't have a touchdown in general in that game, only three field goals, but it was decently close until a 15-point third quarter for the Ravens kind of put it out of reach. Well, let's talk about the Ravens for a minute. The last time they were kind of the number 1 overall seed, 14-2. They had the bye week. They sat everybody the week before. They came out against a 9-7 Tennessee Titan team led by Ryan Tannehill, and they got clocked 28-12. I know that a lot has been made about that, and obviously John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson going to be very well aware. They're also tracking a little healthier. It looks like Mark Andrews will be back for this game. They activated Dalvin Cook off the practice squad to give them some boost in the backfield. How ready do you think the Ravens are for this game?
So I think psychologically they're going to be ready. We just won't know until they play the game. And part of the reason they're going to be ready is because everybody spent the last 2 weeks reminding them of how bad they were the last time they sat for 2 weeks. And so will they be able to handle the pressure? Is the real question. Getting Mark Andrews back is definitely going to help. I'm still not 100% sold that he plays. And if he does play, I don't know that he's going to play a lot. it could be one of those where we're gonna.
I think he's going to play, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see splits. I think they'll have him on there
Because
for
we've
big
seen Likely
passing
produce.
downs.
Likely has produced, and so is Kolar. So it could be a situation where they could put
Andrews though.
They could put. I mean, Isaiah Likely's done a reasonable imitation. They could put Andrews out there and just see how he holds up, how he feels. And if he plays 40, 50% of the snaps instead of 70 or 80, then it's definitely a plus for them. Houston has won 8 of their last 11, including last week's playoff game. So the strength of Houston is their run defense, but Lamar did have 2 rushing touchdowns against them in week 1. So
it's hard for me to take a lot from that week 1 because I think the teams are in completely different places and have figured out completely different rotations. Like and honestly, we saw on Christmas Eve, the Cleveland Browns clocked the Texans 36-22. And how did that turn out? Not spectacular.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Houston.
I'm going to go with Baltimore. I'm pulling for Houston.
Yeah, I know. Look, my playoffs, I was 2-4 week 1, so maybe you should side with Dennis. The second game on Saturday is also the number 1 seed this time in the NFC. The Green Bay Packers 9-8 at the San Francisco 49ers, who are 12-5. Going to be a big kind of game for Jordan Love. Going to San Francisco, he played at Cal there in California. Oh wait, no, he played at Utah State, but he played on kind of that West Coast. And he's going to be coming into this big game with San Francisco, coming off of a pretty big first playoff game for him. How do you think he's going to fare? I don't expect the 49ers defense to lay down the same way Dallas's defense kind of did in that game.
So Love is a guy that's shooting up dynasty rankings right now. 33 touchdowns last season.
I mean, he should though.
Yeah, I mean he's earned it. Now, we said at the beginning of the season we were all excited to see how does Jordan Love grow with this young receiving core. I mean, their top 5 wide receivers and both of their top tight ends were all in their first or second season in the NFL, and so it was kind of exciting. You look at it and it's like, in 2 years, they're losing somebody from the receiving core, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver, just because of the way contracts go. Somebody's going to go. Christian Watson is the guy that has.
Would that really be a loss?
What's that?
I said, would Christian Watson leaving really be a loss?
Well, it depends. He's the most talented. He has the most raw talent of
on the field.
Any wide receiver they have. But that's just it. He hasn't shown the ability to consistently be on the field. So when you look at the defenses, San Francisco, Green Bay's defense hasn't been terrible. And San Francisco's has been a little bit better in sacks, a little bit better in passes defensed. Just these little things that they're just a little bit better than Green Bay. The one place they're like way better is interceptions. San Francisco's got 15 more interceptions than the Green Bay defense. And so if Jordan Love gets pass happy, or if LaFleur thinks, if San Francisco gets up a couple touchdowns early and they go pass heavy, it might not be great. Now the other side of the coin is we saw Romeo Doubs step up and make plays last week, and we've seen Jaden Reed do it this season. We saw it from Christian Watson. We've seen just about every one of those receivers and tight ends have had a game where they just made plays. And this is the biggest stage they've been on. So
the Packers are about as healthy as they've been all year too.
Yeah. And it'll all come down to, how effective can Aaron Jones be? San Francisco gives up the 6th most receptions to running backs. And so that may be the key. And it's that to me, I thought that was a really wild stat because you're always hearing about how good Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw are in coverage. And they are two of the best coverage linebackers, but they can be had. So if Aaron Jones can be productive enough on the ground, maybe they get AJ Dillon back and he's able to hammer it in there a few times, keep the defense honest. I think they've got more than a puncher's chance. I mean, we've seen San Fran, have some down games, not just this last one where they didn't play anybody. Occasionally they'll take one on the chin and get staggered.
Yeah, I mean, they have that 3-game losing streak kind of in the middle. Brock Purdy, he started 3 playoff games last year. One, his first 2 got hurt in that NFC Championship game, so you don't really know what might have transpired. But what are you expecting from him here?
So the interesting thing about Purdy is, that they finished the season 12-5, right? San Francisco. Okay. So Purdy only exceeded 30 pass attempts 5 times. Everything else was fewer than 30. Well, what's that tell you? Well, you got Christian McCaffrey. It tells you a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's had 2 or 3 weeks to heal up. So, sitting and having the bye probably helped him the most.
San Francisco ran the ball 130 more times than their opponents. I mean, and even when McCaffrey was out, Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell both were productive in the running game. Throw in Deebo Samuel with the occasional run. So they threw the ball 74 fewer times than their opponents. Now, that makes sense a little bit. Both of those numbers make sense because San Francisco gets a lead. What are they doing? They're running it to eat clock. Their opponents are throwing it to come back. The Green Bay defense does give up about a yard more per pass attempt than San Francisco. And in their 5 losses, though, San Francisco scored 20 or fewer points. So Green Bay's defense is going to have to show up and keep them out of the end zone. And because the opposite side of that coin, so I had to squint to see the rest of my note here, that San Francisco have only let their opponents score more than 20 points 6 times all season. So their defense plays great. They have games where it may be, 31 or 33 to 18, but it feels like a bigger blowout because they just dominate the clock.
I am taking the 49ers in this one.
I want to take the Packers, but I'm taking the Niners.
Moving on to Sunday game, the early game is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 9-8 at the Detroit Lions 12-5. Going to be an interesting matchup of former number 1 overall picks in Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff. Mayfield and the pass offense, looked pretty good in that Monday night win against the Eagles. You mentioned having your own reservations about the Detroit secondary. How important is it going to be for Baker to have similar success out there on Sunday?
Well, Detroit's secondary is terrible. Cam Sutton and Kendall Vildor. It's going to make Baker look a lot better than he is. So Evans and Godwin both have very winnable matchups. And the Lions give up the second fewest receptions to running backs, and that's where Rachaad White has made his hay. So it's going to be a Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer, or according to somebody else earlier, a Russell Gage game.
I think Gage is out for the season.
Yeah, he's out all season.
It was David Moore, right?
Yeah, it was one of the Lions defensive backs. And talking about the Tampa receivers, said that it was Evans, Godwin, and Gage.
God.
So apparently he hasn't watched any film yet, I guess.
Or he watched all of Tom Brady's film from 2020.
Yeah. No, Baker, from a Lions fan perspective, for me, I'm hanging my hat on Baker's propensity to create turnovers, because Evans and Godwin have just like cakewalk matchups. So we're going to need Brian Branch to get out there and make a couple interceptions. We're going to need Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem Mitchell and, these guys to get to Baker and get him rattled. Because if you get him off his spot and get him moving around and get him rattled, he can get a little bit erratic. But Baker's a gamer, and so that makes me really, really nervous. I feel like this is the Lions' game to lose. And as we saw on Thanksgiving, sometimes they do that shit.
I know you're probably happy not to see Green Bay, honestly. That didn't go that well. For the Lions, their offense came out hot last week, scored 21 first half points, only 3 in the second half, making it a much closer game. What do they need to do to kind of be a little bit better on Sunday?
Look, it feels to me like the Lions are going to have to outscore Tampa Bay with their offense because their defense is susceptible to giving up points in the passing game. So we're going to have Montgomery and Gibbs grind it out on the ground, keep the ball in Jared Goff's hands. Amon-Ra St. Brown. We saw Josh Reynolds have a fantastic game. Jameson Williams, if he can get something going over the top, maybe bust a long play, give us a big play, that's great. And it was good to see Sam Laporta back last week, having another week of practice. I don't think he's going to be 100% for a little while yet, but he did look okay. It really is going to come down to how effective Gibbs and Montgomery can be on the ground. I like our chances. I think that in part, in short yardage, Montgomery can get it in the end zone. And from an explosive play perspective, both receiving and running the ball, Gibbs can get it done. Tampa Bay gives up the second most receptions to tight ends, so that bodes well for Sam Laporta. I like where we're coming from here. I think we've got a fantastic chance. And for me, it comes down to, can the offensive line, can they keep Joe Tryon, Shoyinka, and I forget who the other defensive lineman in that puts a lot of pressure that puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback. If they can keep those guys off of Goff and give Goff time to throw the ball, he's a good passer. He's not gonna. Baker's probably gonna run more than Goff does. Not that Baker's much better at it. He just does it. I like my odds with the weapons we have in Detroit. But given where our defense is, we're going to have to win by putting up points, not by I don't want to be in a position to make another defensive stop.
And I'm hoping they can put up some points, especially with Sam Laporta, because he is on my playoff challenge, and I can use those points. I am taking the Lions.
I am as well. And based on my playoff team, I need some points. I need Gibbs to have a great game.
Next up, the final game of the weekend, probably, arguably one of the most anticipated if you were just watching from playoffs. I know Detroit is for you because you have a very vested interest, but Kansas City Chiefs 11-6 at the Buffalo Bills 11-6. We have seen some classics from them in the playoffs in 2021 and in 2022. Both those games were in Kansas City. Both of them won by the Chiefs, and we've frequently seen Buffalo win in the regular season. They did that again this year, winning 20-17 as part of that 5-game winning streak to close the season. Now, this playoff game in Buffalo, this is the first time Patrick Mahomes has taken the Chiefs on the road. What do you think? Will that impact him at all?
I don't think being on the road will necessarily impact them. The weather isn't going to be an issue because how much colder is it going to be in Buffalo than it was in Kansas City last week? So I think the weather won't really be an issue. Like, the cold is what it is. Kelsey showed a little bit of signs of life. He had, I think, 77 for 71. Didn't get in the end zone. Rashee Rice is coming on, and he's having that classic breakout rookie wide receiver year where he just kind of starts to gain a little traction, slow burn, gets in the beginning of the season for a few plays, just keeps earning more time and earning more time. And he has taken over as the wide receiver one for the Kansas City Chiefs. He is the guy. Are they, they really, I mean, their other wide receivers are so meh, it's not even funny. I mean, McCole Hardman, MVS, Kadarius Toney. They activated Sky Moore's 21-day window. I was listening to John Hansen on Sirius XM this morning when he brought that up, and he said he thinks really that putting Sky on IR was because they acknowledged it was his confidence that was injured, not anything else. And so they needed to go in and do some deep psychological work with him. And I get that. It's easy when you're used to being good and you start playing bad and it can snowball. And then you have another guy come in like Rice who kind of takes what you thought you were going to be able to earn. You can get inside your head and you can kind of, get yourself in a funk. I think Mahomes is going to take him in. They've got a decent running game with Isaiah Pacheco. I just don't know if overall the Chiefs have enough weapons. What was it? Mahomes was QB7 on the year for fantasy. And we're all like, oh, that was so terrible. But, I mean, it was still a pretty good year, but not for where he was getting drafted at.
Yeah, and the Bills did a good job last week of kind of tamping down Pittsburgh's running game, which I think made an impact. And we saw last week not an incredible rushing showing from Kansas City. Was that part of the weather? Was that part of, whatever?
No, I think that's just where they are as a team.
Yeah. For Buffalo, the formula for the last 6 wins has been kind of playing good defense and almost a ground and pound approach, putting a lot of focus on the run and using some big pass plays where we've needed it. It's been a different kind of formula than we've seen from them in the past, but it has worked. What are you kind of expecting from the passing game in Buffalo in this one?
So interestingly enough, I only made one note for the Bills, and that is we are very well, I believe, looking at a preview of the 2024 Buffalo Bills offense. It's Stephon Diggs, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, and Dawson Knox, with James Cook in the backfield, with probably Latavius Murray again next year. I mean, though
playoff Lenny if he wants to stay.
I mean, Ty Johnson has actually looked pretty good the last couple of games too. But Shakir, I think, has moved up in the pecking order with Gabe Davis having these disappearance games. Because I think what it is Shakir can win against zone and he can win a little bit against man. Whereas Davis doesn't win against zone. He only wins against man. I think he's going to go somewhere next year and be another team's opportunity. Stephon Diggs, he had the second half of the season wasn't great for fantasy managers, but he's still a very, very good receiver. Josh Allen is the touchdown scorer on the ground there. James Cook provides some explosiveness both out of the backfield and receiving the ball. I think the defense really has come together. They've stayed fairly healthy this year. They had some injuries in the back end of their defense, and I think those guys, Poyer and Hyde, are starting to come back around. They lost a linebacker, and A.J. Klein came in off the couch and pulled a Joe Flacco and knocked it out of the park last week. So they have, losing Matt Milano was a blow to the defense, but they've rallied around and played great team defense. And that is McDermott's side of the ball. Joe Brady now has started to get the offense clicking a little bit after taking over for Ken Dorsey. And I think we're going to see what we can expect from him next year, which is this, they're going to go from 11 and a half personnel to full on 12 personnel next year.
I just feel like it's Buffalo's year to get past the Chiefs. I'm going to take the Bills in this one.
I am as well.
So we will quickly recap the picks. I took the Houston Texans, the San Francisco 49ers, the Detroit Lions, and the Buffalo Bills.
Congrats on your 3-1 week. I had all the same except the Texans. I took the Ravens.
Traditionally, there's always one upset in the divisional round. So
that's it. Well, you're using the I'm due anecdotal theory.
Yeah, I mean, let's just hope the upset isn't upsetting to one or both of us.
Oh,
well,
I got to be honest. If it is the Lions, how can I be upset? I've been a Lions fan my whole life, and we just don't. The playoffs kind of aren't our thing.
I mean, you can still be upset. Trust me. I remember it's 10 years ago when Denver was the number 1 seed in the AFC. Peyton Manning had set all these records on offense. We were finally opening the divisional round. We threw I was here in Colorado, a huge playoff party, got everything. And Baltimore with Joe Flacco just stoned us. And there's no worse feeling. There's no worse feeling. Well, we'll see how the games shake out. Dennis and I will be back on Tuesday to recap all of the action. Until then, if people are looking to fill that hole in their lives on Friday, what can they do?
Well, they can go to their favorite podcast platform. I just got an email today that the Google podcast platform's going away, so I got to find a new favorite podcast platform. Give us a like and a follow, and subscribe, and tell your American friends. We're the 126th highest rated fantasy podcast in Great Britain, but we're not performing as well back here in the States. Tell your American friends, subscribe. Give us a little boost.
What do you say? We crack top 100. We eat bangers and mash right on the air.
That's right.
Maybe drink tea. That might be easier.
Right. Nah, I can't drink tea like the Brits. I don't like cream in my tea.
I mean, my supervisor at work, he was British. She just drank straight black tea.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe I can roll. Actually, I like my tea like this. I'm in the Monster Rehab iced tea and lemonade.
Well, that'll do it for us today. We'll be back on Tuesday. Hey, but we are open, Monster.
We are
open. Hope you guys enjoy your divisional round and things shake out as expected. I'm also hoping I make something of a comeback because it was a real poor showing for my playoff team.